Good morning, everybody out there. This is Morgan Denny coming to you live from Portland, Oregon. Happy Tuesday. I am lead faculty for the Primary Care Physical Therapy Division. And today we are going to talk about some new findings that came out about diabetes and COVID-19, or if you put them together, diabetes apparently. So this is basically based on a correspondence piece that came out in the New England Journal of Medicine that was put together by 10 or 15 different authors internationally. Correspondence section is basically like a letter to the editor. So it's not research based, but it's kind of taking new collected findings and bringing them to medical literature. So this one was called New Onset Diabetes and COVID-19. Not a super catchy title, but really gets the point across. So one of the things that they are finding in COVID-19 is that people, especially who have moderate to severe cases and who are hospitalized, are ending up with these crazy blood sugar spikes. So some of them have known diabetes and then develop these ketoacidotic moments where they need insane amounts of insulin. But even people who are not diabetic are starting to see these spikes, basically developing diabetes while hospitalized for COVID. Now we know that people who have diabetes are at much higher risk if they develop COVID for having a severe infection. But we've never really seen the creation of diabetic ketoacidosis or osmolarity, like any of that stuff before. And so seeing this repeatedly with patients who are hospitalized for COVID is really important for us to pick up. Now, let's remember, number one, that all of the patients that are in the hospital for COVID now will at some point in time be discharged. They will all be coming to PT clinics around the country and around the world. And so understanding some of this, some about diabetes and some about how COVID is affecting blood sugar is going to be key for us as PTs. Now, I'm a firm believer pre-COVID that we need to understand blood sugar numbers so that we can more appropriately treat these people, catch people who are developing diabetes in the first place, and also know how to prescribe exercise effectively and safely. But now that COVID is kind of creating this new diabetes in patients with COVID-19, and we're going to see these people, we need to really bone up on some of our numbers and understanding. Now, as a reminder, the way that diabetes generally works is via insulin. Like everyone knows that diabetes and insulin are related. So insulin basically is the way that sugar gets into your cells. So the sugar is basically traveling through your bloodstream. It finds a cell, and insulin, if it is there, it has been secreted by the pancreas effectively, basically opens up the drawbridge and says, yes, sugar, you can enter the cell. So that's how blood sugar gets into the cells to be used for energy. For people who have type 1 diabetes, their pancreatic beta cells, which are the cells that create and produce this insulin, those are basically dysfunctional. For people with type 2 diabetes, it's like the insulin just kind of stopped working, right? It got tired, so they say. They don't truly know the etiology behind it. But basically, that's what happens. And so when that sugar gets to the cell, instead of the drawbridge opening and saying, come on in, sugar, or make me energized, it just stays closed. And so blood sugar levels increase, causing those degenerative changes in the nervous system especially. So that's how diabetes kind of works. The reason they think that COVID is starting to create this is because COVID-19 is a virus that binds to ACE2 receptor sites. Now there are ACE2 receptor sites in a lot of places in the body, including like the mucosal membranes in the nose and throat, which is one of the ways this has become such a respiratory problem. But they also exist in the pancreas, in the kidney, in the small intestine, in other places. So they think that it's because COVID-19 can actually bind to some of the, like the pancreatic sites, is why it's starting to create this diabetic type of dysfunction in patients that are infected with COVID-19. So I just want to read a quick passage from this article because I think the authors put it really, really nicely. They said, and I quote, whether the alterations of glucose metabolism that occur with a sudden onset and severe COVID-19 persist or remit when the infection resolves is unclear. How frequent is the phenomenon of new onset diabetes? And is it classic type 1 or type 2 diabetes, or a new type of diabetes? Do these patients remain at higher risk for diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis? In patients with pre-existing diabetes, does COVID-19 change the underlying pathophysiology and the natural history of the disease? Answering these questions in order to inform the immediate clinical care, follow-up, and monitoring of affected patients is a priority. So, even they say this is a priority. This is my dog. So we need to get an idea of what's going on and understand that because COVID is so new, science doesn't totally know what's going on, but at least we do have some guidelines in terms of what is safe and what isn't. So number one, when we start to see these patients who have had COVID or who have potentially had COVID, we need to integrate some new things into our subjective. We need to be aware of the potential onset of diabetes with COVID-19 so that when these people get into our system, we know to start asking, right? If we know they've been hospitalized for COVID-19, we can ask them about any issues with blood sugar while they're hospitalized, any treatment for blood sugar. Does the word ketoacidosis ring a bell? That way we can start triggering an idea or understanding if these patients know that they had this incident while hospitalized, that we need to be more aware of it too. We need to be able to ask about blood sugar monitoring and if they're doing it or if they're able to do it. And for known diabetics, we really need to know if COVID has changed their numbers. So where their fasting blood glucose is, every morning when they're checking, how's their body now responding to a meal, a normal meal for them? So that we can keep an eye on this for patients and really make sure that that's being addressed by their primary care provider. But the last piece is there are numbers that are and are not safe for blood sugar in which to exercise. Now I know as PTs, we're not fond of thinking about like, oh, every time we exercise, we have to check these things. But especially with these patients who are potentially newly diabetic or whose diabetes has changed in terms of its pathophysiology, like we don't even know yet. We need to know these numbers so that we can be as safe as possible. Now, if you're using a glucometer, the top level that you can be at without thinking about anything for blood sugar is 250. 250. Now that's pretty high, but if it's below 250, you're pretty safe to exercise. If it is 250 and above, you need to check the person's ketones. Now, ketone test is a completely separate test from the glucometer and requires a separate urine test strip. Most known diabetics, especially type 1, will have these with them if this has been a problem. But if you don't have them and you check blood sugar and it is that high or higher, you need to send them to their doctor. Not exercise, not say, oh, it'll be fine. You can cause ketoacidosis, which can be life-threatening. So we need to know these things and we need to start checking them. Now, let's say in a perfect world, your patient does have ketone test strips with them. If you test the ketones and ketones are not present, then you're okay to proceed if and only if for type 1 diabetics, their blood sugar is below 300, and for type 2 diabetics, if it's below 400. And those are really high numbers. But without the presence of ketones, they're high, but they don't make exercise unsafe. If ketones are present, we need to stop. It's not okay for us to exercise with ketones in the bloodstream. It's dangerous. Now, we need to know this, right? So how do we know that these numbers are there if we don't check? We're not going to know. So this means like we need to bone up on some of our skills. We need to think about getting that CLIA waiver and taking some coursework like the primary care physical therapy course, for example, to truly understand how to measure some of these things and be safer with our exercises. But now that COVID-19 is kind of forcing us as a medical community to reevaluate what it is we know and what we really truly don't know and what's developing day by day, these skills are becoming more and more important. Now, I also realize that by the time some of these post-COVID-19 patients who are out of the hospital are going to reach outpatient PT, you're probably not going to remember the exact numbers from this talk. And that's totally okay. The key is that you know they exist and you know that you can find them. So be sure when you have a patient that reports either that ketoacidotic spike when they were hospitalized or having blood sugar troubles or being diabetic and having COVID or just being diabetic, that you remember this talk and that there was something you needed to look up in terms of numbers and in terms of safety. So I hope this was helpful. Just remember, we got to keep our eyes open. The COVID thing is a new and developing situation with new information every day. So, hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you on the flip side. The song of the day, because of diabetes, is James Taylor's How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. All right, everyone. Hope this was helpful.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.